teenagers are upset about this and want us to address this speaks volumes to what the future looks like.
Women of minority racial groups are already unfairly disadvantaged by the gender and racial pay gap.
If you're not competitive, you're not going to make it. That's what the free market does. That's how it works.
It's similar legislation that California and New York has passed, and it's been worked out fine for retailers there.
Over 100 students at our high school signed their support for this bill, and we're here to represent their voices as well as other young people in support of this bill across Washington.
This is not students just sitting around talking about issues. This is students actually going out and advocating for those issues and testifying before committees.
My students that I get to work with take a very serious edge on public policy. They research well, and they bring you well-developed ideas.
So we're all seniors at Lake Washington High School, and we're here as part of the really cool Capitol Classroom program, which allows us to propose legislation to the Senate, which is awesome. We're working with Monka Dinger's office right now.
You're involved, you're here, you're about to submit some legislation, you're meeting with state senators. Most folks don't do those things. What is it that has you guys here?
This is something that just will cost a whole demographic more for their entire lives. So to be able to work on something where we can fix that problem is really meaningful for us specifically as girls, but also just to help our communities.
With our work through Capitol Classroom, we have students research ideas. We met with Senator Cooter, Representative Wallen, Representative Slatter, and Senator Dingra and presented this idea actually to all four.
All of these different products.
I picked the 2 or 3 that I thought really had momentum behind them, that they was something that a lot of people were interested in.
They also spoke to the Attorney General's office and here in the state of Washington. So the class did a remarkable college professional level of preparation for this bill.
And this is just an issue that affects women from childhood all the way to like senior care products. So you'll see it in toys, you'll see it in hygiene products, and even services like haircuts and dry cleaning. And so this bill will ban that practice and will establish penalties for violators.
There you go. Oh my God. Well done. And the bill is officially filed, and we'll get a bill number by tomorrow. We'll send it out.
We have a bill number for Senator Dinker's bill, 5171, and here it is. And it's got some really good sponsors.
We work with lobbyist Michael Moran, and so he is able to remote in through a Zoom call and talk to us about bill process, talk to us about the legislative session, just kind of share his wisdom. And then he sent us a message and said, you're scheduled to testify. And so it was a little bit of a surprise.
It definitely felt like it was going very fast.
And with that, we're going to move on to Senate Bill 5171.
And so we all got together on a Saturday and just spent the whole day like writing all of our testimonies, making sure that we covered all the points that we felt were important to address.
Consumer gender discrimination. In the state capitol, this is Legislative Review. The bill was initially proposed by students of Lake Washington High School. If passed, the bill would keep brands from setting different prices for the same goods based on the gender of their target market.
We had a lot of initial research because we were the ones that proposed this idea to Senator Monka Dinger.
It was just a matter of taking that presentation and being able to figure out who was going to talk about which issues and how could you do that in a minute.
Committee members, for the record, Joe McKittrick, staff counsel to this committee. Before you is Senate Bill 5171 concerning consumer gender discrimination.
Good afternoon. My name is Gabrielle Hewer. This panel includes myself and my peers at Lake Washington High School. We all firmly believe in this idea and intend to explain through our testimony why the passage of this bill is essential.
The students, were just incredible in planning this stuff out to be able to figure out, okay, I'm going to talk about this and you're going to talk about this.
It is important to differentiate the 2 demographics most significantly impacted by gender-based pricing.
Unfortunately, over a year, that can cost the average woman to pay up to $1,346 more than the average man on just dress shirts. But imagine now that these price differences are applied to everyday products like personal care, kids' toys, or other articles of clothing.
The Consumer Protection Act is not specific enough as to what consumer discrimination based on sex or gender can be.
This law would incentivize Washington's continued efforts toward equity.
And then we'll make sure that like these things are covered, and they were super prepared.
And with that, we're going to close public hearing on Senate Bill 5171.
Madam Chair, for those not testifying, there were 126 pro, 11 con.
It went pretty good in the Senate. We went through the Law and Justice Committee, and we were given a do pass recommendation, and then it went to the floor for a vote.
The whole trick of this process is to count to 25, to count to 50, to count to 1. 25 votes gets you out of the Senate, 50 votes gets you out of the House, 1 signature for the governor.
If I were the AMPM and I knew that I was going to be singled out for this, I'd quit selling the products altogether.
The next generation demands better. They demand equity. They want to make sure everyone is treated the same.
I applauded the ingenuity of the high school students that brought this bill to the good senator from the 45th district. And I think they do have a point, but if you're not the one responsible, you shouldn't be punished. That's real equity to me.
There are 27 yea, 21 nay, 1 excused.
I've received a constitutional majority. Substitute Senate Bill 5171 is declared passed. Title of the bill will be the title of the act.
In the Senate, it passed, which was very exciting.
But then it had to go over to the House.
Normally, a bill goes from one committee of jurisdiction to its mate in the other body. So from House Judiciary to Senate Judiciary. This one went from Senate Law and Justice to House Business and Finance. Committees with different jurisdictions, different philosophies, and different interests in the bill.
Biggest opposition to this bill. Who do you think it's going to be and why?
Republican members, particularly those with business ties, organized business, the Association of Washington Business, the Retail Association, the Hospitality Association, all of whom will have small business owners and large business owners that believe that this is a government overreach in telling them how to price things.
And so I don't understand just kind of the underlying thought behind this, because it's a free open market.
It was viewed as a social equity bill in the Senate, but in the House, it was viewed as a business operations bill.
How would this bill, with its price fixing for substantially similar products, not run directly afoul of federal anti-monopoly law?
Who would pay for these, and who would be responsible?
Who is responsible? That's the key question to ask. And I appreciate all the polling data asking a lot of questions, but nobody asked that question.
So we did know that it was going to be tougher to get it through the House committee.
Should we then also dictate a neutrality ratio in those scenarios to dictate the amount of square footage in a gender neutral way that is being used for those, say, clothes that are being offered for sale?
I think a lot of the representatives in the Consumer Protection and Business Committee have ties in business.
We are a citizens' legislature. We rely on the experiences of our legislators in their private lives to govern their decision making.
And obviously, half of their committee's job is to make sure that there's like a fair economy and business is going well in Washington.
All of those pieces, the number of square footage, how is a retailer supposed to carve out these variations in cost drivers?
And the small businesses rose up in both cases and made a compelling argument that they should not be the recipients of the regulatory impacts.
We are sadly testifying opposed to Senate Bill 5171 as written. We appreciate the enthusiasm of the students who have testified today and praise them for bringing this issue forward to the legislature. Unfortunately, this bill would unfairly penalize local grocers for pricing set by manufacturers.
We really tried to prepare our testimonies to reflect those points. Something that I appreciate is that nearly everyone I've heard testify on this issue has readily acknowledged that gender-based pricing is a real problem, regardless of whether they support the bill. I think it may be so universal that everyone has witnessed it on store shelves as they buy for themselves or their loved ones. Those that oppose this bill have made the argument that it would unfairly punish retail businesses who buy products from manufacturers that set discriminatory prices. They argue that retailers are forced to then replicate those discriminatory prices in order to avoid taking losses on those items, which, just makes common sense. But it's important to note that Section 1, Subsection 2 of this bill already addresses this problem. It says that any gender-neutral reason for charging a different price for goods would not be prohibited under the law. The price at which a retailer buys a product from a manufacturer is inherently a gender-neutral reason. In that situation, the retailer is not violating the law, the manufacturer is.
So, yes, they can have a defense based on what that bright student said earlier. However, if the news were to be published, their reputation is already harmed. Nobody will try to follow up to see whether they were guilty or not. And they also have to hire a lawyer to deal with it. Can you imagine dealing with that when you're dealing with day-to-day operations?
It is an interesting, hardcore lawyer question of where do you apply the pressure?
I think that in focusing in on exceptional circumstances like these, we're losing sight of the bigger picture here. As a young woman, I want to live in a state that recognizes charging women more for the same products is wrong. That is what we're asking you to do today. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. My question to you then is, if I understand your assertion correctly, that the price passed on by the retailer, there's an assumption that the intent is gender neutral, that they are simply passing on or marking up the price based on their need to recover costs. If that was the case, let's assume good intent, would you all be opposed to an amendment that then frames the retailer's responsibility to respond to a complaint as simply needing to provide disclosures about how a consumer could file a complaint against the manufacturer for those prices, that price differential? Or is it that you absolutely are expecting the retailer to be the respondee?
Well, frankly, I'm a high school student. I would have to say that I don't have the expertise that all of you might have on legislating on these specific issues. However, we reached out to the Attorney General, and it is my understanding that Moncajingra has already made a comment on how this bill should be amended, which is that it should not be amended.
In this case, we had a bill that was, by the prime sponsor's reckoning, fully cooked, did not need amendment, and landed into a hostile reception in the House.
Ultimately, it did not pass in that committee, which is when the bill kind of halted.
We're going to close the public hearing on Substitute Senate Bill 5171. I thank the members of the committee and our staff, as always, for your time and attention and hard work. We are adjourned.
You know, the committee structure is designed to slow stuff down. And we do have committee chairs that believe in the rights of the minority party to have their say. And we had members in that committee who are business owners who also had their own strong concerns over the bill.
I think it makes a lot of sense, but obviously we need to get more input from other people with other perspectives to really have a well-rounded view of what this bill will do in Washington.
It's possible that the bill could come back, and obviously the idea is still a good one. So for the future, if our Capitol Classroom class wanted to continue with this bill, they would know, okay, this is how it's going to be received, and this is the things that are going to be talked about in these public hearings.
Creating change is always harder than just leaving things as they are. So I think it takes time for people to take the initiative. It takes time to get more people on board with any initiative, and we're excited to see that we're starting to make a little bit of change.
You know, it's really incredible because we are able to actually do the things. I mean, you want to talk real world learning, this is it.
Learning in a classroom is so different from learning in person, and sending emails to real people who can influence public policy and going into Olympia and testifying. I mean, it just makes the process a lot more real. It definitely helps you learn it a lot better. This is like the one unit that I didn't need to study for the exam because I was in it, like I lived it.
When I started this year, I kind of had like a history student's knowledge of policy, which is like famous laws that get passed and like historical events. But learning civics and learning how to be civically engaged is something that is really important, especially here when you can really make a difference by being civically engaged.
If you're involved, people will listen, and that's important.